Now, here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
All right, here we go, this 4 o'clock hour. We'll have a couple of segments today on the Dallas Cowboys as they go through training camp. I saw where Dak Prescott is not going to throw. And they said for 2 or 3 days, well, they're about to leave. They got a Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio, and Jimmy Johnson, Drew Pearson, Cliff Harris will be a part of the induction over a couple of nights. So if he doesn't throw for 2 or 3 days, they leave for Canton, then they come back. So he's not going to throw for about a week. It's not a tear in his throwing shoulder or arm. It's just something that's more precautionary, but there was video of him working out. We'll get to the Cowboys at 4:30 and also 5 o'clock here in just a moment. But we know Dan Lust. He's been great for us, sports attorney on ESPN, CBS, and Fox Sports. Con-Detrimentalist podcast and professor at New York Law School joins us on SicEm365 Radio. Dan, what the hell's going on? I mean, this is people are pointing fingers. This is what you specialize in. Does Bob Bowlsby and do the teams in the Big 12 have a leg to stand on with their accusations against ESPN?
Well, it remains to be seen, right? It's a very, very heavy accusation. And, guys, always a pleasure joining you. And I always, expected to call with this Big 12 stuff, but I did not expect a cease and desist letter to go to ESPN. So put it this way, right? People are asking me what a cease and desist is. A cease and desist by itself is basically just saying, like, it's stop or else, right? The cease and desist by itself doesn't really mean anything. It just says, hey, if you do this thing that we're telling you not to do, then we are going to sue you. So in the legal profession, we kind of say, like, a cease and desist is not worth the paper that it's on. It doesn't really mean anything. But, right, if you do the thing that they're accusing you of doing, then there could be legal ramifications. So does Bob Bowlsby have anything, right? Is it just, just swinging accusations wildly? I mean, I find it odd that he would be going after ESPN, period. You would think that the Big 12 would want to be partners with the ESPN. And I don't know if you're going to go after ESPN. ESPN probably did something, right, at least according to Bob Bowlsby, worthy of kind of torching that bridge. So if I'm a betting man, right, I think Bowlsby's not risking his reputation on nothing. He's the one that kind of started it, at least in the public perception.
Dan, so tortious interference, tortious, not a word we use in the modern parlance outside of the legal profession. So what would you have to prove that something is in fact tortious?
I actually don't think people say modern parlance either. I think that's a U word. That is not a real word either. So tortious interference, the minute I saw, the comments from Bowlsby, it sounded like he was going after tortious interference, and then he ended up saying it. So here's the easy breakdown. Cease and desist is pretty easy. It means stop or else. Tortious interference is basically saying if two people have a valid contract, right? We'll say Baylor and the Big 12, they have a valid contract. If some stranger comes in, be it ESPN or any random person on the street, and they help Baylor break that contract with the Big 12, not only can the Big 12 sue Baylor, they can also sue this person, a third party, that decided to interfere with a valid contractual relationship between two people. So the person that's helping the person break the contract is also not innocent in this whole process. Here's lawyers, anyone that's following this, here's the interesting thing. You know who people expected to get a cease and desist? Greg Sankey over at the SEC. That one made sense, right? Just like we watch in pro basketball, right? People kind of say wink, wink, nod, nod. Hey, there's no tampering, but how did everyone's salaries line up perfectly on this one team? It doesn't really make sense unless there was some communication. The Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, it makes some sense that they had communications with Greg Sankey, right, or back and forth, but no one wants to fess up to it. Now, the cease and desist doesn't go to Sankey. It goes kind of off the grid and goes to ESPN. So this tortious interference is this really important element here, right? I think Bowlsby is worried about other people, right? Not necessarily conferences, but these middlemen, right? These brokers, these facilitators coming in and letting, Greg Sankey walk with clean hands. Hey, I didn't do anything. Maybe a middleman did something. So I think it's a very loud message that Bowlsby's sending. And hats off to him. I think he's fighting for the conference. I think he's doing everything he needs to do at this point.
So when it would come to, if it ever got far enough to present his evidence, whatever that may be, he says he has, without a doubt type of evidence. Does that typically entail, I wouldn't think just word of mouth would be concrete, right? Just having somebody who says, yeah, I know about this. I mean, do you need documents? What kind of proof, evidence would you need to prove something like that?
You could use word of mouth. You could have a witness, right? You could have an email. You could have a recorded conversation. But the context that he's saying it, right, I have concrete evidence. when we say concrete and legal perfection, it's usually something tangible that you can hold. Or maybe it's an email, you can't really hold it, but something physical. I think that's what it is. But just think about, is that possible? I mean, at the end of the day, Bowlsby, right? The schools are supposed to have the Big 12 schools are their allegiances to Bowlsby. Is that crazy that ESPN or the AAC, who's allegedly kind of trying to swoop in and take some schools, right? Is it possible that someone sent an email or a text message and then they brought that to Bowlsby? Yeah, I mean, they're supposed to have their allegiance to Bowlsby, so it wouldn't be that far-fetched that he would get something like that. And modern communication, right? This isn't like, people just talking on the phone. There's text, there's email, there's DMs. So it wouldn't be that crazy if that's what occurred here. But, to the larger question, will we ever know what this concrete evidence is? I think Bowlsby's daring ESPN or anybody else to find out. Cease and desist is not necessarily required. You could start a lawsuit against anyone. You don't need a precursor of a cease and desist. So my reading of it as a lawyer, this is a very big warning shot. Do not go after Big 12 schools or else, right? Bowlsby is gonna lay the hammer down.
Dan, I'm not very good at poker, and so I don't have much of a poker face, I don't think, and I'm surely not very good when it comes to legal. But if Bob Bowlsby has something, and this might be just stupid, but why wouldn't he just plaster that out somewhere right now? Or is that because you want to make sure you have something? They may know you have something, and you're going to get something better in the end.
Yes and no. I mean, honestly, let's just take it at a high level, right? The Big 12 is going after ESPN, and I think they may, again, at least by allegations, it could have caught ESPN with their hand in the cookie jar. And if ESPN's confessing to making some type of mistake here, you don't air someone's dirty laundry. That would really torch the relationship between the Big 12 conference and ESPN. And there aren't that many ESPNs out there, right? You kind of can't really bite the hand that potentially could feed you one day with a lot of money. So I think this is maybe, hey, listen, you guys shouldn't have done this, but we're not going to air your dirty laundry. Just don't do it again. That's cease and desist is just kind of a scary letter. Again, there's no teeth to it. You haven't said anything. You haven't put it out there. But I think that's really what it is. I think it's a warning shot. But I guess from a practical level, guys, you guys over in Big 12 country right now, right? Texas, Oklahoma leave if and when that does occur, right? The Big 12 is down to 8. So if you lose any other schools after that, that's very problematic to your Power 5 status. Mm-hmm. And, if recruiting schools wasn't hard enough, right, retaining schools is just as hard for at least Bowlsby, at least in his perception. So if you lose 3 more to the AAC, you're going to have to find 6 or 7 quality schools. That's a much, much taller test to save the conference. So I think if you can hold tight and retain the conference as the Big 12 or as the Big 8, whatever it is right now, finding 2 schools is doable. Finding 5 schools is a much taller test. So that's why I think Bowlsby kind of said to himself, listen, if I lose 3 schools here, I might be out of a job, right? There's no Big 12 commissioner. If there's no Big 12 conference, I have to go scorched earth here. I mean, or else what are we doing here? So I think it was the right move. I think it was a strong statement. And he's basically saying, don't go after any Big 12 schools.
So does this mean now that the Big 12 can't go after anybody if they decide to expand, or do they just have to wait that out?
Well, that's my favorite part of this, right? Bowlsby saying, don't touch our schools. And then we're all sitting here on the sidelines like, hey, doesn't the SEC have 16 schools and you guys have 8? So aren't you going to need to steal someone else's schools? Yeah, it's setting him to be a little bit hypocritical, but, Bowlsby sending a message. He needs to recruit schools. So is he going to wait for people's rights to expire? Sure, but, he's got to recruit some firepower. He's got to do it fairly quickly. So, would it be shocking if he helped and tried to go after a school that was under contract, and dealt with the ramifications later? Possible, but it would seem hypocritical. But, as you guys saw, I pointed out on Twitter, I think that's what it's setting up. He can't lose the schools like Oklahoma and Texas and not replace them with firepower. So sometimes you can't kind of wait around and wait for right contracts to expire, right? Sometimes you need to take the destiny into your own hands.
Dan, what did you think of the response from ESPN's Burke Magnus to the Big 12 and Bob Bowlsby?
Was that the one that said there is no merit to these allegations? Yeah, that was great. I saw about 12 tweets from Bowlsby taking his gloves off and punching ESPN with these haymakers, and then I saw 2 words from ESPN, and I'm like, you know what? That's pretty good. Just short, to the point, no merit. So they're painting Bowlsby as kind of this guy off the rails. He's he's throwing haymakers left and right. He's got nothing to lose, and then ESPN just hits him with no merit.
So let's go over the grant of rights and penalties. In each conference, I'm sure, has different bylaws or whatever. right now, the Big 12 TV network contract runs through 24-25. So there's 4 seasons left. And then on top of that, in the bylaws of the Big 12, there are penalties if, in fact, you leave early, not just you paying whatever years remain grant of rights. Dan, that's hundreds of $400 million if you look at the grant of rights over 4 years at $35 million. That's $250 million. We've received 180. They're not going to pay that, are they? What do you think is going to happen in the end? They pay part of it, or if the 8 stay strong, does Oklahoma and Texas just have to bite the bullet and stay another year or two?
It's tough. I mean, I've seen maybe some grumblings that maybe the new conference, if it's the SEC, helps foot the bill. But with lawyers, right? You have involved lawyers. You never. I'll put it this way, right? Let's say someone sues for $1 million. They're not going to get $1 million unless you take the case all the way to trial, all the way to its logical conclusion. There's usually a settlement to be had there for like 80 cents on the dollar, 75 cents on the dollar. So, I imagine there's some type of settlement they could work it out. But I think what Texas and Oklahoma tried to do, and this is just my opinion, my kind of high-level viewing of this, right? They say, hey, wink, wink, we're not going to leave until 2025, wink, wink, but, if anybody else wants to do anything in the meanwhile, you guys are free to do what you want. So as people have pointed out, right, if the Big 12 conference doesn't exist, who is Texas paying this money to? Who is Oklahoma paying the money to? So, I mean, I can't imagine these schools have that amount of money just lying around liquid. Maybe they could build it up over a couple of years, but they're not going to have that lying around. So unless the SEC helps them fit the bill, I find it hard pressed to see them do it. But, again, if you want to believe these reports from, the ESPN, the AAC report, if 3 other schools were thinking of making the jump, I mean, then all of a sudden the Big 12 is down to 5. And then, those 5 schools are probably looking for another place soon. And guys, again, SEC has 16 schools. Big 10 has 14 at this point, and they're trying to keep pace with the SEC. Maybe they want to pick off another 2 schools, depending on where they get it from. And maybe they go after a school like Cincinnati, who is not in a Power 5 conference, or maybe they go after, the Big 12. So I don't think we can say for certain what's going to happen in the Big 12. Either they retool or, the schools kind of cut bait. But I think it's really up in the air right now. That's why, as a fan of Big 12 sports, I like Bowlsby coming down and saying, I'm fighting for my conference. I'm coming out swinging. I think that was the only move he had, and I think he did it effectively.
So, Dan, what is the next step now? So Bob has said what he did and made the allegation against ESPN. ESPN has now responded and said, nuh-uh. So where do we go from here next?
I think it's a little bit of a stalemate, right? Like, if Bowlsby can hold down the court and keep the schools in place, then it's a matter of recruiting to try to replace the firepower. But yeah, I mean, listen, in terms of a lawsuit, no lawsuit's going to happen unless Bowlsby thinks that ESPN actually did it. But if you actually go out and sue ESPN, it's very different than sending a cease and desist letter. Cease and desist is not a precursor to a lawsuit. They don't have to sue ESPN. They might, but I think that is torching a bridge, which we've never seen done, right? A conference suing a television network when the conference is in the business of doing deals with television networks, I think that would be insane. So I do think this was a message that was sent, and Bowlsby has his eye on just retaining his schools. And that's the way he saves the conference. Retain the schools, and then see who you can pull otherwise. But yeah, it's really a matter of quantity at this point. I think you just need to get the numbers up. You can't be a conference with 8 teams and looking at a 14-team Big Ten and a 16-team SEC. That's going to be very problematic to, again, staying within that Power 5.
There are so many more things legally in sports, and we're not going to have time to get to them. So, Dan, I'm going to try to be back in touch with you again to get you on with so much more that's going on. Thank you as always for trying to help us clarify and understand, and we can't wait to get you again.
My pleasure, guys. Anytime.
That's Dan Lust at Sports Law Lust on Twitter, on various networks, sports attorney, analyst.
He's
and
really
also
good.
His podcast at Detrimental is very, very good.
You know what he and in the podcast that he does is really good is there's all these sports legal issues, and a lot of times you'll hear an expert on the air and they just talk straight in legalese. Dan, I mean, if you don't understand after listening to Dan, I mean, I don't know how much easier you can make it. That's why it's so great.
I feel like I kind of had a grasp of what was going on. But yeah, he just explained it really simply, and now I definitely have a much better grasp of what's going on as far as like the moving pieces and whatnot. And interesting to get his perspective on Bowlsby's move yesterday, and obviously the ESPN response today. So I guess we now just wait and see what the Big 12 decides to do next, or if ESPN decides to do something next, or what. But yeah, now a stalemate is what it has become. So who makes the next move? Be very intrigued by what happens next.
All right, 424. We have another segment then, Mick.